Welcome to Podcasting Power Hour with your host, Jeff Townsend, aka the Indie Podcast Father. I'm your co-host, Greg, from Indie Drop-In Network. Podcasting Power Hour is recorded live every Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on Twitter Spaces. Every week, an experienced panel of podcasters and other experts will tackle your podcasting questions. We will, of course, put links to all of our guests and any relevant information in the show notes. All right, let's get this party started.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and children of all ages, welcome to the best Twitter space that there is. It's Podcasting Power Hour. I'm Jeffy T. I'll be hosting tonight, or you can call me Jeff Townsend. Either one's fine with me. The man, my first officer, helping me fly this, I almost said ship. It's a plane. It's a massive plane. It's Greg from Indie Drop-In.
Thanks, Jeffy T. Welcome, everybody.
I just made that up. Did you like that?
No.
I didn't think you did. All right. The old school, the 11-year running podcaster from the Mallard Report. It's Jim Mallard.
Thank you, Jeffy T. Good to be here.
And you got the accent on that one. That's too much.
And I'm excited to have Neil up here speaking with us tonight. Neil Headley. He's a old school radio guy, and recently on my podcast, I shared one of his episodes from the Voice in My Head podcast. And it's spelt in a clever way. Thanks, Neil, for coming up here to speak.
Yeah, which is killing my discoverability, but thank you for that anyway. No, I appreciate it. It was a treat to get it out in front of some new ears, so thank you for that.
No problem. And I just shot old Mayor McFuzz an invite, but he denied it for some reason. I'm not sure why, but
He's tired of us. He's like, forget this.
Yeah. No, the flight engineer this evening will be Fuzz Martin. Fair enough.
No explanation needed. Don't worry.
It doesn't matter. Let's just go. We're just running. We're running down a dream. There was a lot of sweaty balls going on. It was hot. Sounds like a party. So joining us this evening is Dave Green. We were just chatting beforehand. Dave's been involved with a lot of the stuff that Conrad Thompson's been doing in the podcasting space since, 2015, 2016 is really when he got onto the scene big time. And Dave, I don't know what your exact position is with the Podcast Heat Network. This isn't necessarily an interview, but just a quick rundown of how you got involved in all this.
Sure. Yeah. So I heard somebody say they were an old radio rat. That's me. So I started in programming 100 years ago and was doing sports talk radio in St. Louis, which is where I'm from. And did that for a long time. Ended up running some stations where Conrad lives in Huntsville, and his mortgage company, our top client. And so we got to know each other pretty well. I was not there for a very long time, but the time that I was there was when he had just gotten done doing the Ric Flair show and was getting ready to start his very first podcast. So he had 7, and the whole time that he had the 7 for a while, I just helped him on the side and was still working in radio. And then I left my full-time radio job almost exactly a year ago. And since then, we've added 13 more podcasts.
Incredible. So in the meantime, go ahead and shoot your request to come up and speak. And then just as a reminder, there is a little comment section down there on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. Join the discussion. If you don't want to speak, that's certainly an option. No, Dave, I think that's awesome. And like I said, Podcast Heat, what we're talking about, what you're involved in here, like you said, has really come to form here. And it looks like you've been adding additional content outside of wrestling, because anybody that's listening that doesn't know who Ric Flair is or some of the names he's saying, Ric Flair is the greatest professional wrestler of all time, the most skilled, the best at everything. And so Dave's had a really cool connection with Conrad, who had a connection with Rick, and they've built a whole network around this. And it's a lot of, to be honest, they're very popular podcasts. So that's super cool, Dave. You got involved.
Yeah, I mean, sales and content creation was pretty much my background, so it fits so well with podcasting, and we're the ultimate, target audience. Our 15 wrestling shows is 98% male and 96%, 25-54. So it's just really, so it's almost exactly what I did when I was in the radio business, except in a different format, and the ad agencies actually like talking to me.
You mean chicks don't dig professional wrestling? I'll be damned.
A few do.
I'll go ahead and pass it off to Greg. Greg actually has a network that he manages. It's more feed drop based, but I know that Greg has dabbled in, and he thinks about doing other things as far as networks go. So I'll pass it off to you, Greg.
Are you trying to say that Indie Drop-In is somehow less of a network than Podcast TV? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, I'm not saying that at all.
Ric Flair. I mean, that's true.
Woo!
Now that I think about it, I think you're right. No, I don't know. For a topic for today, I was thinking, there's a lot of questions about networks. What do they do? What are the different kinds? And, since we're both on, Dave, and we both have very different networks, I thought maybe we could just cue that up as maybe the first topic. And, we can talk about why a network is good, what it's useful for, and all the different types.
Yeah, love it. I mean, I think it's, it's interesting from such a different background than a lot of people in the space, in the sense that, both Conrad and I are salespeople by nature. I've sold, media for a long time, and he's sold mortgages. And the idea of being a network is simply, we have people that can provide content, but nobody knows. I shouldn't say they don't know, but they don't want to deal with the sales or the marketing. And these guys, the expectation is to make a fair amount of money. So I think there's all kinds of reasons for them, and what they all do well. For us, it's trying to figure out what are the different ways we can monetize it besides just selling ads inside the podcast. And that's been a huge, success for us. So I think, everyone sort of has their niche in terms of the, the idea of a network, but for the most part, we're mostly sales and marketing. I don't know if that's the same for you or not.
Yeah. So what you would say, now let me try to sum this up. So you find shows that fit your niche or have decent overlap, and find creators where they just want to create. You bring them in, you work out some sort of a deal with them so that you take over marketing, ad sales, all that kind of stuff, and they produce content. Did I have that right?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. And, we've got people that we can provide to them to do everything soup to nuts, right? We have editors, and we have people that work on all of, what we kind of call our in-house podcast. But so we also can give them access to that. But for the most part, it's, hey, you go out and create content because that's what you're good at. We'll both market it, and we're really good at sales, and so we'll handle that. And that's kind of how it works.
Yeah. So for my network, it's more so, I guess it's closer to 100% original shows. So all shows in my network are owned by me, but I use them for marketing of indie podcasts. So 100% of my shows are feed drops of other smaller shows looking to grow. So my audience essentially is looking for, like for instance, if I started a wrestling show, smaller wrestling podcasts would submit episodes to me. They would license an episode to me. I would play it. I would market it. I would run Facebook ads. I would promote it. And the listeners would come to me. They would hear their episode, and then the next wrestling podcast episode, and the next, and next, and next. And hopefully they find one that they can leave me. I fully expect my listeners to leave and go to like one of your shows and become a super fan. So that's a win for me. And in the meantime, I make money on the ad revenue on that listener basically during their journey. And so mine is 100% marketing. So like yours is marketing and sales, and then mine's 100% marketing. So we do overlap a little bit, but like you said, it's just two different ideas for networks.
Yeah, and what you just described, I mean, that's really cool that that's even available, because I get it. I mean, we've been very fortunate. Conrad, you can listen to Jeff's interview with Conrad and hear the whole story. But I mean, they started a podcast and had no idea if anyone was going to listen, and hit on a topic that never in a million years did they think would be the one that would all of a sudden get this first podcast 150 plus thousand people listening a week. But we also have had some clunkers, and we have a fairly big network to advertise to. So I often wonder about those people who are creating content and don't have that network, but the content is good, so that's great for them.
Yeah, I look at a network like a strip center, like an old school strip center. Like typically there's an anchor show, and then there's like the donut shop and the nail salon and all those that kind of live off of the people coming to see coming to the grocery store.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that's a great comparison. And again, for us, we've kind of we come at it from just a weird angle where we've got these guys who are, and the one thing about wrestling, if you know anything about professional wrestling, these guys were storytellers for their whole lives, and that's what makes it work from the content standpoint. As far as the network, we will actually here in the near future even more so become one, because we started as 7 individual businesses, and it was really hard and really confusing for the user. And so that's always something that we're cognizant of is, we want to get people coming to a place where, as you said, they can not only come for their favorite, but they can identify others while they're there that they might like.
Exactly. Go ahead, Jeff.
No, we'll go to the first person we have that's requested to speak. It's the T with the B podcast. Move like a butterfly, sting like a bee.
That's me. Thank you for having me. Very excited. And my question is probably a little bit more towards Dave. And I don't even know if I would call this a question. I also have a radio background of being an anchor and, a career in media. And the one that I feel like right now is I don't want my show to sound too radio, but I feel like my background is kicking in. So how do I approach it?
It's a good question, because I tell people, we obviously get pitched a lot of shows, and I always tell people that, the first couple mistakes it seems like that a lot of people make is they don't want to focus on anything. They want to do a talk show. And, there's an outlet for talk shows, and that is radio. And I don't know that there are very many successful podcasts that are sort of, all place in terms of topic. Like you can do on a daily news talk show or FM radio morning, show, like that type of thing. But so it's interesting. It's there are a lot of things about radio that I do think translate over, but it's more the concept of constantly thinking about how am I going to hook these people, for what's next. And it seems to me, and be interested, Greg and Jeff or anyone else's thought, casting is, the narrow focus of it, where it's, the audience, and they know, who they are, and they know what to expect every time they're there.
What do you think, Neil? You're a radio guy.
Well, I mean, my first question would be, what do you mean when you say you're worried about it sounding too radio?
My background is pretty much 100% in news radio, news reporting, news anchor. And with those who've worked in news, they know that it's very quick, it's to the point, it's less than 30 seconds for every story. And I feel like I keep ending up in that background where, I'm just newsy and I get to the quick bits that people want to hear about. And I have a marketing and sales background. I know how to show that to people. But when I'm interviewing the people, I feel like I'm ending up in my reporter chair and I'm questioning. It's like I'm questioning a politician. And I want it to be a little bit more conversational, and I'm trying to break away from that.
See, from where I'm coming from, and I mean, I started in radio in 1981. So
I was
for
not
me, thanks for that. Wow.
No, that's amazing. I love radio.
The thing I would look at is I would look at your radio background, actually, and Dave and Fuzz and others in the room with a radio background. Feel free to disagree with me on this, but I feel like you've got leverage, as opposed to being something that you need to stay away from. Embrace it and find a way to channel that. I mean, there is, without naming names, the owner of a podcast hosting company who, every time I listen to his show, he sets up kind of this us versus them thing between podcasters and broadcasters. And I just don't get it. I actually heard him claim in one episode of his show that podcasters have absolutely nothing to learn from people who have been in radio. And I'm sorry, I quibble with that just a little. So for me, it's not necessarily that you need to get away from sounding to radio. It's take the stuff that radio has taught you and leverage that. So you obviously know how to do a great interview, which, with all due respect and deference to the podcast universe, I would say 75 to 80% of podcasters don't really know the mechanics of a good interview. You already have editing and all of those things down pat. Just channel that. I don't know that you need to get away from being a broadcaster in order to be a successful podcaster.
Thank you. That's a perspective I actually had never taken, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Jim Mallard and Fuzz Martin, I want to get yours, but Jim Mallard, you're on the reverse side of that, where you've literally kind of have a talk show podcast for over a decade.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm the podcaster in this group apparently tonight, even though I've never really thought of myself as a podcaster. Because I do it live, so that's kind of a different dynamic that I've always brought into it. But I didn't hear what your topic was, because I mean, some things lend themselves to conversation, and some of them just lend themselves to I don't want to say soundbite, but I don't know what else to say at this point.
Fuzz, save him.
There's no saving Jim. I come from radio on the programming and also music station morning show side. So it comes down to obviously, as was mentioned before, as Dave said, having mic technique and editing skills and interviewing skills. All of that is stuff that you're so far ahead of the curve with. I think it just comes down to your show and what how polished you want it to be. But if you're concerned that it's going to sound too polished, you can, in real life, you're not always on the radio, so you can dial back the that presence that you get when you get in front of the mic and just be you. If you're looking to not make that be so polished and sound too smooth and too radio, you can just be yourself and have fun with it. Now, again, I don't know your topic, and Jim was asking was what the topic of your show was, but I do think that all the skills that you've learned plus just using your everyday personality is gonna be where you win.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And you're right in terms of that actually is one of my biggest worries, is sounding too polished and too news anchor, because the tea with B, my podcast, is about, it's spilling the tea on just about anything, because I want the point to be showing that our stories bring us together rather than tearing us apart. And the point of it is, try to bring human beings together, realizing that we all have shared the same pains and the same loves and the same struggles. And to portray that, I feel like that's where the radio part kicks in and causes some troubles.
So all we've learned tonight is just hang out with me a little bit, and you'll just learn how to ramble and not make any sense, and we'll all be good.
Craig, do you want to sum this up as another person that is not a radio person?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you what I've seen because I've featured over 400 podcasts on my, and I can tell you the ones that outperform the others. And it's tricky because you have a podcast about everything, and that's challenging because it's hard to build fanatics when they can't find you, right? Like, you're doing a podcast on camping and you can search for camping, or you show up in a camping website, or you run ads for camping, people can find you. And radio is kind of a captive audience. I mean, I'm in St. Louis, Dave, so I'm here now, left. And there was only like 6 talk shows on in the morning, and maybe 3 of them that were any good. And usually just settle on the one where you like the you like the music or you like the politics. It's one of those two. And so what I would say is there's 2 things that I've noticed with talk shows that outperform other ones. One is they stay with segments, but they have what's called soft segments. So instead of like using transitions and things like that, the transitions, and you interject some of your own personality kind of in the dead space. Talk about what you thought of the last segment and kind of what's coming up, those types of things. In interviews, you interject your own opinions without obviously over talking the guest, because they come to hear you. They hear you every time. They hear the guest once. So what you want is, if you have a big guest, you put their name in the title of your episode, you might get a couple of hits from that guest, but they hear you, they hear your personality, they understand your views on the topic, and they stick. So those are maybe just 2 pieces of the thousands that are out there that I've noticed in the shows that do well on my network. Whether or not, that's applicable to everybody, I'm not sure.
Try having a podcast about podcasting. Oh no, go ahead, Ed.
Well, I heard while she was asking the question that she wanted to work on being less reportery and more conversational with her guests. I was wondering if Bea has any friends that she could practice being conversational in her interviews that don't necessarily need to be put on the podcast, but just something of a training exercise for herself so that she could try to get into that more conversational mindset. That's one of the things that's worked for me. I'm not an interviewee. I'm not, by my background, I'm not a radio person by my background, but I think that my most recent set of interviews podcasts went much better because I actually practiced interviewing friends about things that I would cover on my show without ever recording them. It was just for me to practice being a better interviewer and conversationalist. So I'm wondering if she has that ability to do so.
Well, it's actually ironic that you said that, because when dealing with people or when doing my pre-interviews for my show, very conversational, the most easygoing person probably in real life you'll ever meet. And yet when that record button hits and when the camera is on, it's just like automatic. I can't even help it. It's like I feel like I'm back in the newsroom with, my news director is just like breathing down my neck, and I don't become so conversational anymore.
Do you know who Clint Eastwood is, right? As a director,
Yes.
Not as an actor. So one of the things that because I have a film background, one of the things that Clint Eastwood does is that he often shoots the practice runs when he's working with an actor. Okay, let's just give it a try. But he'll roll the cameras, and more often than not, he'll actually use those takes for the actual film instead of just waiting for the official take. So maybe, are you recording your conversations with them when you are doing your pre-interviews?
I don't record the pre-interviews, ironically enough.
Oh, maybe that's something you can think of doing, because in case something comes up that you think will edit well into the final show, then you have that extra, for lack of a better word, footage in order to work with. And then you can also hear as it's like, oh, hey, that was a nice nugget. And then when you're putting that nugget into the final product, you can actually hear yourself being conversational and remembering, oh yeah, I did this. And just because, I mean, I don't need to tell you practice makes perfect. But that's what seems to work for a lot of people, is just record your actual pre-conversation. I've done that myself. Some of the better bits from my most recent set of interviews actually came from the pre-interview, where I was just on Zoom with a friend, somebody who I've known for many years, and there were things that I wouldn't have thought of asking him unless it came up in the pre-interview that I actually ended up editing into the final product. So that would be my suggestion, is just tape those pre-interviews, record them, and just hear yourself when you're going through those pre-interviews, and remind yourself of how you were, so that when you finally get to the actual interview, maybe you'll have that frame of reference. It's like, okay, that wasn't so bad when I did it before.
Thank you, Ed. That was beautiful. Greg, I'm going to let you put a bookend on this, then we'll segue to the Bro Amigos podcast, who's up next. In the meantime, though, go ahead and request to speak if you want to come up and talk. If not, you can shoot a comment down on the lower right-hand side of your screen there. Go ahead, Greg.
Ooh, I get to do my co-host duties. So exciting. I'll end with, Ed reminded me of something that I was told by, I think it's Dallas of 20,000 Hertz, which is a pretty big show. He told me that he will re-record the entire part of his side of an interview if it doesn't have the tone or the sound of what he wants. And also he'll interject a bunch of things in there that he wanted to in the interview, but in the moment couldn't get his brain to work properly. So you have in post the opportunity to add your opinion and to set up the next question. You can dump your entire side of this interview and re-record it, in your studio by yourself, with a margarita.
That's what I do when I fuck up and forget to plug in the mic.
Oh, I've recorded a couple of questions and I was like, ooh, re-recorded some things. I was like, I sounded so stupid. Like, I need to re-record that.
Podcasting Power Hour is part of Indie Drop-In Network. If you are a podcaster looking to grow your listeners, check out IndieDropIn.com. Indie Drop-In is always free, and we have opportunities right now for comedy, true crime, scary, and paranormal podcasts. Just go to IndieDropIn.com to learn more.
Bruh, Migos, good.
Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here on this Monday night. So, I heard something mentioned about networks earlier in the show, and it kind of sparked an idea into my head because it kind of relates to some back-end deals that both this show and my other podcast, 69 Whiskey, are kind of working towards. And that is the idea of, or that is working with an internet radio website, so to speak. I'm just kind of curious as to what some of your thoughts are in regards to if not, it's actually useful to be on that sort of network, if you even consider it a network. Just I guess general thoughts, or if you have had any experience with it yourself. Just so maybe if any deals do go through, I kind of have an idea of what we're getting into for possibly both shows.
Yeah, go ahead, Jim. Kick it off.
So I'm probably the one at the table here with the most experience with internet networks, having been on, over 30 of them at this point, I think it is. It all depends on the network. It all depends what they're offering you. It all depends on how strong they are. There's no blanket answer to that question, but I would just do your research, because often I've found that I spend more time promoting them than they do me. So just be careful.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I've had discussions with the guy who is in charge of the network, and everything that he's been saying to us is kind of what we've been looking for in terms of what their audience is, some of the tools that they have, and some of the things that they could do for us in terms of getting sponsorships or even merchandise. So all that sounds all well and good, but I'm just obviously at the end of the day, it all comes down to forming an audience, and I'm curious to know whether or not they actually sort of do that kind of thing.
I was going to say, talk to another show already on the network and see if they're doing that. Because I had one network owner tell me they had an 18-month plan to be on Sirius XM. Sounded great. Never happened.
What do you think, Dave?
I think, again, it goes back to what Jim started to say there at the beginning about, it just kind of depends on the network, and what they're offering, what their listenership is, how, closely it relates to the audience that you're trying to attract or do attract. So, it's kind of hard to say just, in blanket if they're good, depending on what it is. I just always try and stay away from exclusivities, right? I mean, there's doesn't ever seem to be, a secret place where you can go to, get mass audience, or everybody would go there. So, it's still all of the things that apply to, building audience are all still going to be there. The question is, can they help you get there quicker? And I think I would ask is, give you some examples of shows that are to yours, that have worked, or however you define work, or audience, or more revenue. But I would definitely check, quote unquote, the references of who else they've helped build.
Yeah, definitely. And to your point about the exclusivity, funny enough that this network doesn't really actually have that sort of thing. So they have flat out told us that there is no exclusivity. You can be on any other platform that you already are on. You're just, you are basically coming onto our network, and we're going to do whatever it is that we spoke about in terms of offering if you want to use those sorts of tools. So,
The most hated man in podcasting, Tanner Campbell. Do you have any dealings with networks?
No, I think I'll mirror maybe what someone else said earlier, and that is that they tend to make you do a lot of the promotional work, and they don't often do too much for you. But I'm sure that's not true of all networks. I mean, there are probably legitimate podcast networks out there, and I think maybe an indicator of those is that they have something more to offer you when you sign on than quote unquote exposure and reach. They might be offering you something more, not tangential. What's the opposite of tangential? Concrete, like some money. They might make some promises about numbers, and I think that's an indicator that those networks are probably more serious and better funded and maybe more experienced. I know in the early days of networks for podcasters, it was basically just a bunch of people who were like, let's get 6 of the best shows together, and then we'll sell ads to 6 shows that all have 20 listeners each, and that'll work. Which didn't work too well for too many people, and I don't know that it's gotten much better. I wonder if Danny Brown down there listening has any insights on this. He probably has more than I do. And also, big shout out. Hold on, Jeff Townsend. Shout out to Marty Ray, who is a fucking baller, and he should come up here and talk. He's a smart guy.
I did shoot Danny Brown an invite. He did not accept. But to your point, Tanner, and I think that's what Dave and the team at Podcast Heat are doing, because at no point in time is it about the network itself. They have larger than life characters. They have podcasts on the network. It's a completely different beyond exposure, Dave.
Yeah, and it's got to be, to go back to the radio tie-in. I remember 6-8 years ago telling people in radio, DJs specifically, and morning show hosts, you better build your audience for a 24/7 approach. Because if you don't, then you're going to lose them, because that's where other people are going to get ahead. Because that's what social media, is doing, right? You have to, in the marketing side of it, everyone has to contribute or it's not going to work. I've got one right now with a big name celebrity, and said celebrity kind of not refuses, but doesn't believe that social media, promoting their podcast should be something they're consistently doing, because she sort of looks at it from the angle of, am I bogging my social feed down just promoting this? When the truth is, the best podcasts have to constantly be marketing and promoting. And for us, as you said, I mean, the podcast heat means nothing. It's the individual names and, the people. And for others, it's the content, right? The actual name or, who's behind you, the network. It doesn't matter unless they're performing in some way, shape, or form for you, whether that be getting you those numbers or getting you that advertising or whatever it is. But my sense is there's a lot of people out there that are, sort of in the same realm, gobbling up things, making promises that they probably don't back up that often.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. But just to take it back to kind of this specific thing, like internet radio networks, to me, it's really oil and water. I mean, I know, Jim was saying, he's on 30 of them or whatever, or was on 30 of them. I mean, I specifically avoid advertising my shows on podcasts who are not kind of pure podcasts, where they say, oh, I have 100,000 listens a month on whatever internet radio station that I've never heard of. I'm on channel 6 in New Jersey at 2 a.m. or whatever, because I don't know how to quantify that audience. I don't know how to pay for it. I don't know that what I'm going to tell them about is relevant. And, I think it's mostly a scam. Like, I just don't know how they report back their audience. And I'm sure there's good ones out there for sure.
Greg, I'll share this with you. I had a network tell me that they add 3 zeros to the number that was showing on the broadcast program. That 14, like, you add your, that was the actual listener count.
Yeah.
You add 3 zeros to that, you make that 14,000. That's more likely your listener count than that 14, even though it's under the internet and, these things ping off each other and can be counted. Whatever. Just add zeros. It's okay. Nobody checks it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we already have kind of nebulous, podcasters will hang me out to dry for this, but downloads doesn't equal listens. So we already are kind of nebulous on the numbers that we're using, and advertisers kind of give us a long rope in order to perform. And I just think that, getting involved with internet radio stations that aren't Pandora, that aren't Sirius, that aren't iHeartRadio, I just think that they should, put their money where their mouth is. I'm not going to put my shows on any of them that aren't going to pay me significant amount of money to make it more difficult to talk to my sponsors.
Yeah, but what about like the totally reasonable argument? And I'm sorry, what's his name? Dave Green. I'm sorry, Dave Green. I didn't really realize that you were the guest of this room. I spoke a little harshly of networks. I dropped in here a little late. Didn't mean to do that to you. Isn't that kind of going against, Greg, the idea of potential? I mean, isn't it important sometimes to take risks you don't know will pay off because they might?
Well, yeah. I mean, you could even put your podcast on billboards or some other things like that. I mean, you could totally do anything, but, an internet radio audience may or may not be a podcast audience. And what is your goal? To have humans listen to it, or for free, or to monetize it?
Yeah, but part of what you're saying there that I have a problem with is, and we're going to fight about, Greg, you and me in the streets tomorrow, high noon, is that you are suggesting that the ultimate conversion in that scenario is that they become a podcast listener instead of an internet radio listener. Like, what's wrong with being a podcaster who expands into internet radio and leaves the listeners there?
I don't think there's anything wrong with it as long as the reporting is accurate and you can explain it to sponsors or advertisers, which I struggle with. So that's my caution, is I don't trust the reporting. There's nobody measuring it. There's no central reporting agency verifying it. And there's no way for you to verify it unless they, like, who knows, right? Like, I know I can easily manipulate those numbers. So I just don't trust it.
Fuzz, is there something in radio that does like, okay, if you're broadcasting between and this is terrestrial radio, I understand there's a difference, but you're broadcasting between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. and our average listenership is this, and so it's reasonable to assume that X percentage is active during your show. Is there something like that in internet radio?
I mean, the old, Arbitron and all that stuff. I don't know. It's been a while since I've done anything in the sales world where I've had to do that. We just go when we're buying stuff now. We go by straight ranking numbers. We don't try to do any of that. I can tell you who does that a lot are magazine publications who will say, try to get you to buy ads in their, trade pub, and it's, our circulation is X, but 3 people will pick up that magazine and read that. So instead of 20,000 people, you're actually getting in front of 60,000, and therefore our prices are adjusted to that. I can't think of anything on the radio side that is like that. I mean, it's sales, so I wouldn't be surprised if some people do that. There's average of 4 people in the car on the commute on the way to work or anything like that. But I can't think of any software or any sort of thing on the terrestrial side that suggests that. Dave,
that was the longest explanation and answer to a question there was.
Was it really that long? Jeez.
All you had to say was no.
It's been nice talking to you all. We'll see you next week.
No. Oh, no, it's already 10:15. Yeah. No, the answer is no. I have no idea.
I'm just messing with you.
Messing with Fuzz.
Sorry to burst the internet radio bubble, but like anything, if it sounds good, try it out. It's not gonna cause any harm.
I've been around that ball court. There's so many loose ends, and it's too early yet. I hate to say it, but I don't think it's there, and I don't think the people that are running them, for the most part, have their shit together. I'll say it that way.
I don't think it's ever going to be here.
Go ahead, Neil.
Never a thing.
Go ahead, Neil. Before we move on we have 3 people in queue here. Go ahead, Neil.
Yeah, I just to kind of put a bow on this and pick up on something that Tanner said. I think it kind of depends on what your goal is and where you're hit. Like if number one goal for you is monetizing your audience, okay, through your downloads or whatever that is. However, I would point to someone like, for example, Seth Godin, who is a multi-millionaire, and you can't get Seth Godin to come and speak at your event for less than $50,000, et cetera, et cetera. And Seth doesn't even care that 85% of the books that he's ever written are available for download for free. He doesn't care, because to him, the thing that's the most important is getting himself and his ideas out there. He doesn't care where they are. He doesn't care if you found a pirated version of a YouTube chat that he gave. As long as you become a fan of his from however you heard of him, then at some point down the road, he will pry a couple of bucks out of your wallet. He absolutely will. He's not worried about how you became a fan of his. So if, internet radio ends up getting you 25 extra fans that you weren't counting on because they had some loosey-goosey documentation of how many listeners they have on a quarter hour, I wouldn't be so worried about it. But if your monetization from your downloads is your one and only concern, then yeah, you should probably stay far, far away.
Just got a DM from Danny Brown here. He's on his computer, so he's replying on the metrics question. Look at the brand lift and brand recall. How does it grow following a promo? Can you tie a podcast mention because it's tied to a definitive landing page?
So basically the same approach you take to measuring the efficacy of a billboard ad or a Yellow Pages ad. For those of you who are younger, the Yellow Pages was this really thick book that got thrown at your door once a year, and it had all the businesses in it. And then there was the White Pages. It had all the people in it.
Thanks, Tanner.
Yeah, I think I heard of those.
Yeah.
What were the Blue Pages? I was always confused by those.
Those were the government businesses, the government contractors.
Tanner wouldn't know. All the pages were stuck together. All right, Romeo, we're going to go to you, Go Ram. Go ahead.
I love ads so much I'm masturbating to the Yellow Pages. Thanks, Jeff.
Wow. But about the audience, when you guys say audience, like a person's audience, do you guys go by the age or the demographic, like female or male?
It really depends on what you're trying to do. So if we're talking about audience as to your ideal audience, that's who you are targeting your show toward, whether that's through, well, a number of outlets, the way that you speak to them, the way that you advertise, the way that you, who you want your listeners to be. And then you could also say audience as who your actual audience is, those who are subscribed listeners or regular listeners. So yes, all of the really kind of comes into context of what, that discussion's about. So if that makes sense.
Thank you. Yeah, it makes much sense.
Anyone else up here have anything to say regarding that?
The sharper your demographics are, the better you can advertise to them. So just as deep as you can go.
Beautiful. Just don't stop. Keep digging deeper.
That's right. Get Yellow Pages out and go deep.
Okay. Pixie from Next on Stage 1 is up next. Hey, Pixie, what's going on?
Gosh darn it, I'm shoveling chips into my face. I was going to go back to the networking thing. Make sure you read the fine print. Make sure you own your content. Make sure you have an exit strategy if something goes wrong. Make sure you know what you're getting and taking out of it. We got approached by Screw TV to be on a Roku channel. The guy became flaky. He had bought the Roku channel. He wasn't the original owner. He made a whole bunch of promises, and it just kind of lack of communication between us and him. And he just basically ghosted us. So we didn't have anything signed. There was a lot of questions that he didn't want to answer about, monetization and stuff like that. And before we could sign anything, because we were looking it over, it was brought up that it might be beneficial to get a lawyer to look at a contract. So when you're going into any business that has money in it, make sure you read all of the details.
We did have that one guest, I don't know, maybe a month ago, who was signed up as part of an ad network and was not getting service the way that they wanted to, so therefore they weren't making any money. But because of their contract, to Pixie's point, how to go out and find their own advertisers, and so they were just hamstrung to that contract that the people they signed the contract with weren't doing anything for them, but they weren't also allowed to do anything for themselves because of that contract. And to that point, you really need to make sure that that's clear. And I would spend the money on a lawyer, even though they're, it could be expensive, but they'll save you on the backside. So
also, if I can make a suggestion here about lawyers, because they can be very expensive. And one of the reasons that they are expensive is because a lot of them, most of them, almost all of them, work on a retainer. And so you'll give them, making up this number, but it's only $10,000. And then they'll just let you know when you're out of that money. And then you'll have to give them more. But there's this great law firm for creators in the Pacific Northwest. I want to say I think it might be in Seattle. And it's called Rational Unicorn. And they do pay for service type pricing. So you can get, for example, I don't know the price off the top of my head, it's very affordable. So you could do a guest release for $150, but it's a real attorney that makes it. Or you could do some kind of intellectual property agreement, patent, licensing, trademark, copyright, something, and it's really approachable for independent creators because that's kind of what the law firm's purpose is. That's who they aim to help. So if you're looking for legal help, I think it might be rationalunicorn.com or Rational Unicorn Law. If you Google that, you'll find it, but it's a helpful link to have.
Dave, what do you think?
I think that's a great tip, definitely, from the legal side. But yeah, I think what she said is so dead on. I mean, just make sure you're not giving away the farm, for a promise. And I think biggest thing is to always find examples, find people who have done it. there's so many traps out there. I think, in of people who are trying to accomplish things that aren't maybe in alignment with what you're trying to do. Most people are just trying to get audience and make some money. And as I said before, there's just not many shortcuts out there. And if it sounds like it is, there's a pretty good chance there's some catch to it. So just be careful.
Hey Dave, how do you structure your deals? Like, do you buy a percentage of the show? Is it just a split on the ads? I'm sure there's differences, but maybe how do your kind of contracts set up?
So all of ours are set up as partnerships. So we're all in it together, and it's a really important thing for us because, as I said earlier, the marketing of a podcast has got to be everybody, from the network to the individual hosts to the other shows that are involved and other people. So we want everybody to feel like they've got skin in the game, and there's no reason for them to slack. We're certainly not going to slack, but if they're not doing their part, it's only really going to hurt themselves. So ours are set up for everybody to win if it wins, but you're sort of sharing if it doesn't, because we make people understand before they start show what the expectation is, and that we don't fall into a situation like we did with the one show that I explained earlier, where we had someone who wasn't on the same page as far as marketing of the show and how to build that audience. So it's just really important.
Got it. 2 more people here. We'll try to get through it. We'll stay over a few minutes to knock it out. Marty Ray Project, you're up.
Marty Ray. What's up, Tanner? Yo, brother. Hey, are you here at Podcast Movement by any chance in Texas?
No, but my buddy at Samsung asked me about. He just texted me, asked if I was coming, and I wish I was. So, you got free tickets?
I mean, no, I bought 12 tickets for a bunch of people, but you weren't on that list, Marty, because you got all that money from that beautiful.
Now, why is that, Tanner? Why am I not on that list?
You got that beautiful country voice, buddy.
I know, that's why I should have been on that list.
Don't worry, I wasn't on that list either, so don't feel bad.
God,
none of us were.
About how many tickets he bought, how he bought Yellow Pages back in the day. So
he's lying, by the way. He's just lying.
Just rolling in it.
You can't
prove it. It's like a bragcast for Tanner right now.
Oh my God, let's start one.
The question is, what isn't for Tanner?
I'm just shocked that I was on Twitter for the first time in, I don't know, 10 years. And I saw that they have Clubhouse now, apparently, on here as well, which is, I know this is not Clubhouse, but they copied clearly. I think that's pretty cool. And I saw Tanner was in here. So I came in here to hear him make jokes about the Yellow Pages, and he didn't let me down. But I also do have real questions about networks, because when I see that Greg has a network. So Greg, what does your network actually do for the podcast that they bring in, and how, because I've always wondered, I'd love to have a network behind me that could help me in a lot of things, but I don't trust networks because of what some of the other people have said. So what if somebody brings their podcast to your network, what do you actually do?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the network you're looking for is probably closer to Dave's network, because what mine does is it specifically markets individual episodes that have been licensed to me by indie creators. So I have 3 categories with 3 more launching soonish. And if you fall in one of those 3 categories, you can submit an episode, and then I take that episode as my own, like I would my own podcast, and I market it accordingly. So, you'll see Twitter ads and Facebook ads, and, plus I already have an embedded audience. So the goal is to get net new ears on an episode so that someone isn't forced to find you in a podcast app that's difficult to search in, Google you, or have you recommended by a friend, which we all know is 1 in a million for any avenue you want to go to. So that's what I do. So I don't take on shows, although that's likely in my future. But right now I don't take on any entire shows. But I think you might have missed Dave. His network will take over all sales and marketing of ads, and then even has production offerings. So I don't know what size show yours is, but Dave's probably closer to what you're looking for.
I get 1 million downloads an episode. I'm joking. It's a joke. Don't get excited. Anybody.
You do one episode a year.
As Dave's sitting here with multiple podcasts that get millions of episodes.
See, Dave, it didn't shock him at all. He was like, "So what? Please, I do 3 million, 3 million a week." So Dave, I need your help if you're willing to help. I don't know what I got to do to try to get some help, but I do have a large following. It's not for my podcast; it's for my music. But I don't really understand how to get my fans that are. I actually had a podcast in like 07, somewhere around there, before anybody had a podcast. It seems like before it was even cool. There was just radio people hated people like me, and I was a podcaster, and I'd say this is the wave of the future, and they'd say, "Yeah, right. We'll see you, son."
Radio rejects is what they called us.
Yeah. You try to get guests, and hey, will you be on my podcast? And they'd say, "Pod what?" And I would say it's kind of like radio, but you come in, you interview. You don't even have to come in. We can do it over the phone, but it goes out to the internet instead of your car. And they go, "Yeah, I'm not interested." And so I was like, "Okay, well, we'll see you in the future, buddy." And some of those people now have their own podcast, so it's kind of funny. But anyway, I do need some help. If if Dave is willing to help, or anybody knows anything about networks, and anybody's had anything good happen. It sounds like, Greg, what you're saying is you buy single episodes. Is that what you're saying you do? Or somebody pays you to take
He's
a single
too cheap
episode?
to do that. He wouldn't buy anything.
No. So people submit them, and if they qualify, basically if they're any good, then I promote them, and I'll get the ad revenue from that one episode, but it doesn't cost the podcaster anything. So, most indie podcasters have a negative bank account balance, and I don't want to contribute to that.
So when you take the podcast, that episode, you essentially get in perpetuity the revenue from that particular episode?
No, just so basically it's up to me. I just get P3, and it's up to me to do something with it that benefits the person who submitted it to me. So they still get it. It's still on their channel. They still they own it still. All I do is license it from them for the use of only promoting them. So, so any ad revenue that I get are from listeners that I bring in. So it's 100% risk-free to the podcaster.
I got you. Well, I might have a couple episodes I need to submit. You got a pretty high success rate?
Yeah, he gets quite a bit of he spends a crap ton on ads. Yeah, Greg does pretty well. I mean, different genres do better.
Yeah, I'm not in Dave's. I mean, I'm in the millions of downloads, but I'm not to Dave's level.
Ed, go ahead.
Dave, hit me with it. What you got? Anything, any tips, advice for me?
Well, yeah, I think again, it depends on what you're looking for, but there's got to be, a music community, I would think, where, they would specialize more in, the audience that you're trying to reach. But the tip I would give you in terms of, of content is, what we've always found, and I don't know if you were on earlier when I said this, but we find that people, like we have Ric Flair, people come to hear Ric Flair, and they come to hear Ric Flair stories, and your fans come to hear you, so they want as much of you as you can give them. And you know what? It's also okay to ask them what they want. If you're not converting as many of your music fans to your podcast, let them in on topics. We do a lot of polls. What do you want us to talk about, right? Because then that gets them talking and giving you feedback. But I'm not a big believer in just the generic podcast network is going to make a big difference for you. It's which thing do you need maybe the most help with that you could turn over to somebody else might be the better question.
I need to make that money, Dave, now. That's what I need.
Yeah, so that's building audience. I can, I don't know what your numbers are, and you're certainly welcome to reach out to me, and we can have a conversation more specific about yours. And I'd love to help and point you in the right direction if it's not a fit for us. But again, it just comes down to numbers in the end. And if you have them, you can equate it to revenue, and that's that. But at the same time, there's no miracle workers. There's nobody out to say, we'll take your, and I'm just making up numbers. We'll take your podcast that 1,000 people are listening to, and we're going to have 20,000 people listening to it. It's just, it doesn't exist.
Have you ever taken a podcast that was brand new and you actually helped them to get, not that mine is, but you actually helped them as a network to get to a place of just even say, I don't know, 10, 20,000 downloads an episode? Have you ever done anything like that?
Yeah, I guess technically we've done that for
all of them.
All of them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but celebrities.
Because they were all, a lot, again, we have advantages. I'm not, we've got people who have, a couple million followers on social. So I'm not trying to make it sound like it's, it's a comparable situation. But the answer to your question is yes, all of them started as, having 0 listeners and building the audience. And as I said earlier, there have been ones that haven't hit. And that's more about the content. But if the audience is there, we've been able to monetize them.
I got you. Well, then I'm gonna contact you, so we'll see what you think. I appreciate your help. I appreciate y'all letting me talk up here. I really do. Thank y'all.
No problem. That's the purpose of what we're doing, right? It's also networking, and we're being introduced to new people, vice versa. So appreciate you taking the time to chat. We have time for one more here. Jaya, I hope I'm saying it correctly. We will finish things off with you.
Thanks, Jeff. It's Gia. My real name is
Well,
Julia,
shit.
and
Well, shit.
It's okay. It's okay. If it's not Gia, you're gonna butcher the other name definitely. So it's fine. I'm a marketing and online specialist, a content and funnel strategist, and I just started a Spaces show back in last year, since October all the way to January, called the Twitter Spaces Decoded. And it received a massive positive feedback from the community on Twitter, and I got a lot of speaking gigs from it. And the thing is, I recorded all of my sessions and I converted it into a podcast, but I would like to monetize it. Now, back in the day when we were all happy with Twitter Spaces and excited about it, we were running Spaces for like 3 hours, 4, 5 hours, right? So I did my shows. My shows were very structured. They were well done. And I made sure so that the listener can stay all the way. So the structure was a guest. I bring in a guest from a different industry, a specific industry, and I interview them on their journey with social audio, their success, how they manage that, how they grew their communities through social audio, their branding, etc. The reason why, it's because I got a lot of clients who are really doing really well, but they don't know anything about social audio or how to tap into it and how to grow their communities and brands, etc. So I decided to do this show. Now, I converted it into a podcast, but I would like to monetize it because I got people from Fireside and they're like, listen, this is Fireside. So I go to Fireside and I do the same thing, but at the same time, I would like to monetize it. I'd like to maybe grow this and get sponsors from it. So I'm about to launch season 2, but I want to format it and structure it in a way where it can be monetized. I'm a podcast beginner here, honestly. So this is all new to me, all the tools, all the softwares and editing and all of that goes into podcasting. So how can I monetize a Twitter Spaces show into a podcast?
Well, I know that Greg and I have been talking about getting an actual, I mean, you can explain to Greg if you want, but getting one idea is getting an actual sponsor for the space itself as it's happening. That's one thing we've talked about. But then I know, Greg, you're doing stuff on the back end with the podcast itself. So I'll let you touch up on that. But the one idea would be the space itself, promoting it throughout it. Maybe the sponsor is involved in it. Obviously, we need to relate to the subject matter, but go ahead, Greg.
You're right on target. I mean, there's lots of ways to monetize a podcast. There's lots of podcasts out there about monetizing podcasts, but the short answer is I would say, depending on how many downloads your podcast has, what I would do is I would approach a couple of advertisers that maybe are in the tech space or in the social media space or wherever overlap you think they could sell something, like a Twitter management company like Hub, whatever it is. Like, I don't know, Fuzz can tell you the thousands of them that exist. But like that, they might sponsor the podcast even if it only has 100 downloads an episode, because it's the perfect target audience for them. And then you could throw in live reads on the space itself that you would then cut out and do something more professional in the podcast. But you could do, just to kind of add some weight for the sponsor, because I don't know how big the podcast is, but I'm guessing the space is probably bigger than the podcast right now.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is. And I just started with Podbean, Spotify, and Good Pods. This is where I uploaded it to.
Sure.
But like the space, yes, when it's live, I definitely get a lot of audience, but it's just converting it to a podcast. Is it worth it to, because I haven't seen this yet, where someone took an entire show, converted it into a podcast and monetized it. I see podcasts that are monetized, but not that way.
Yeah, we do that on this show. So you'll see this if you go to podcastingpowerhour.com. What I do is I add dynamic ads in to the show. I add pre-rolls, mid-rolls, and post-rolls. And while I'm building the downloads for the show, because right now, let's say it gets 200 downloads an episode or something. Like, no, there are sponsors that I could sell that to, but I'm not going to deal with a $100 sponsorship. Like, I just don't have time to mess with that. So I want to get it bigger before I start doing anything with it. But in the short term, you can turn on programmatic ads, and I know Podbean has some. Okay. That I just don't know when you qualify. I'm not sure about that platform, but I would email Podbean and ask if programmatic ads can be turned on. I mean, it's only probably a few bucks. But it's a start.
All right. Thank you. And what do you advise where I can start with, like, with a good platform? I just chose Podbean because I just Googled it and it was like the most user-friendly one, but I'm open to suggestions before the show grows. So I'd rather establish my foundation in a place where it can grow and I can monetize it easily than migrate the entire podcast somewhere else.
You're going to get a whole bunch of opinions in here.
Yeah, that's a can of worms there. Oh my goodness.
Oh no.
Well, I mean, so if you want to have programmatic ads in it, there's certain platforms that currently run that. There are others that I know are working on it and have talked about it. Danny, but Greg, you use Spreaker, right?
Yeah, I use Spreaker, but Spreaker has an option for people hosted on other platforms. So, and I know there's a lot of programmatic ad providers where you can put a prepend in and still do dynamic ads. So Podbean is fine. I would say you're totally fine, because programmatic ads, I mean, at 1,000 downloads an episode, you're making $4, $10, right? $20. We're not talking hundreds of bucks. So this is what I'm saying. Like, I put it in there just because I have it and it's easy. But I would never switch platforms for $20 an episode. So I would reach out to like Sprout Social and those folks and just tell them what you're doing. Tell them about the community that you're building. Hopefully you're collecting email addresses for a newsletter.
Oh, I am, definitely. Yeah. I did. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would package that all up. I would email Sprout Social. I would talk to Fuzz, pay him for a couple of PR things, a couple of milestones that are coming up. Just invent some. It doesn't matter. write a press release for them, and then take that and email it to these places to start the conversation. Hey, if you're looking for advertisement, maybe there's an affiliate program. You can, if you DM me, I can kind of give you all these in text form so you don't have to remember. But there's a million options. There's so many options. If you
my
can convince them, yeah, go ahead.
My turn. So on the flip side of that, we're talking programmatic here. There's a guy down in the audience that you should reach out to named Danny Brown.
I see him.
He's employed by Captivate, and I think, like Greg's saying, that might not be the best bang for your buck right off the bat. But what something like a Captivate does is they're working on that, programmatic ads, by the way. But on the flip side, they're very hands-on and actually are involved and give you sources that help you grow your podcast. I mean, they have live YouTube events that they do. They have tutorials. They have all sorts of amazing tools that will help you. And it's incredible. You can just reach out to the people that founded it and are involved in it.
Nice. Thank you so much, guys. I truly appreciate it.
No problem.
Now I know where to start because it exploded. Honestly, I did not expect it. I thought it was just going to be a casual show, but it grew very fast, and I want to maximize on that and help people as well. So
congrats.
I'm on the right track. Thank you.
By the way, the companies in your sphere, social media, platforms, all those, they spend a lot of money on this type of advertising, and they understand it really well. They understand influencer marketing. So start reaching out. Go on LinkedIn, find their marketing people. Like, just you got to start networking, because it'll take you a year to make the kind of contacts where you make hundreds of thousands of dollars easily. It'll take a year.
Okay, now I know what to do. Got lots of homework. Thank you so much, guys.
Eduardo, we'll let you've had your hand up for a while. Your arm's probably tired. Then we'll go around the horn for final thoughts.
I'm good. I just wanted to ask my mortal enemy, Greg, if he's ready to publicly say what the next genres are going to be for the indie drop-in.
Oh, for sure. I can totally say that. So the three genres are it's all in the TV movie category.
Art, literature, and
no
pornography.
No. One's going to be called After Hours. It's just going to be Pixie's show. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. That would be funny though. No, so they're all three in TV movie, but it's going to be like TV movie, cosplay, fandom, things like that. And the whole series is called the Fanatic series. And the first three is going to be horror, science fiction, and fantasy. So the goal is to get a TV movie pod, a cosplay pod, of, like any sort of kind of fan pod, or even if you do fan fiction, if it's horror, science fiction, or fantasy, to give those shows a spot. What I'm fighting with, and Ed, we can take this offline because I'd love your opinion on this. What I'm fighting with is, how do I handle the new stuff? Because these shows are going to be a lot bigger than most of the TV movie pods that'll be on it, if it works right. So when the new Batman movie comes out in 5 years or whatever, I don't know. I don't. But it'll be better if that episode is on my show for Discovery than on another person's show. So hit me up in my DMs, and I'm not your mortal enemy, by the way. I've just followed you. So, we're almost friends.
I know, but some of my best friends are my mortal enemies.
Yeah, good. Perfect.
He does hate dogs though, Ed.
Oh, I do not. It's more likely I'll hate Ed than any of his dogs. That's for sure.
Oh wow!
Why would you hate my dogs? My dogs are awesome.
That's what I'm saying.
It seems to be a recurring theme though, that people hate Ed's dogs. I'm not really sure why.
I mean, I know Villainous hates my dogs, and I know the Mormon guy, or the guy from Pennsylvania, hates my dogs. But you're the only one who ever brings it up, Jeff. I think you hate my dogs.
Maybe I just like stirring the pot a little bit. So with that being said, we will move on and close this thing out. I think for me, I can't say this enough. I think this space is great because it really gives people of various different skill sets and people with various different, wherever they're at on their podcasting journey, I guess you could say, the opportunity to share what they know, opportunity to learn which is important. We want to continue to do that. And we're all in this together. So I think it's always awesome when we get together. We bring in people every week that bring something special to the table, or we try to. And I think it's an important part in growing, asking questions and not being afraid to. So with that being said, I do appreciate everybody that listen, and of course to everybody who's speaking and sharing this advice. I'll go to you next, Greg.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Jeff, that you don't love the unconditional love that pets can provide, but maybe someday you'll get a dog and you'll understand. But thanks everybody for coming to the space. As always, you can go to podcastingpowerhour.com and see a link to listen to the podcast version of this, where you can see that I've loaded it up with ads to sucker you into giving us some money, which is good. So yeah, podcastingpowerhour.com. Thank you.
You can always super follow me too. I mean, that's a pretty good option.
That helps me none though. So I just want to point that out.
True. Yeah. True. All right. We'll get to Fuzz, Jim, and Neil real quick. Fuzz, I know you're always available to help people, man, and I appreciate it. Give you a second to say anything that you want, plug your stuff or whatever you want to do.
Yeah, sounds good. If you ever need help, reach out. You can hit me on a DM on Twitter. I have nothing really to promote other than as always, Jeff, thanks for putting this on. And I saved a man's life today by teaching him how to use AutoGate instead of manually eliminating noise in between a speaker's actual main signal. So feeling pretty good today about podcasting, and I'm looking forward to next week.
You're a damn hero, Fuzz.
Hey, Fuzz. Fuzz,
yeah.
did you ever launch the podcast specific like press release service, or are you still thinking about that?
I have the trailer done. I do not have the podcast set up and ready to go yet. I'm writing episodes, and I do better feeding off of people with bullet points than I do straight writing for myself. So I can write for anybody else any day of the week, but writing for myself is proving to be a challenge. So, but it will soon. I will get it done before November.
Give it to one of those new interns or those new hires you have that aren't doing anything.
I should do that. Maybe I'll do that tomorrow. It's a good point. So yeah, looking, I work in the public relations space, and I'm looking to launch something specific for content creators about that soon. So stay tuned.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mallard. I am for real.
I'll keep it quick. Thanks, Jeff, for doing this. And if you're out there hanging out in limbo and just listening to us, go ahead. Feel free to drop us a direct message. I know all these guys up here on the panel will love communicating. They communicate with me all the time. They're great. And a lot of great questions tonight. And yeah, Jeff, thanks again.
No problem. Neil, I do want to make sure you mention your podcast, because like I said, I shared an episode last week of it on mine, and I've had so many people tell me how much they enjoyed it and how they're just appreciative that they discovered it, and you share great information, man.
Well, I gave my family very specific instructions for how to get in touch with you, so I'm glad that they all reached out like that. No, listen, I just want to say thanks for having me. Thanks, Jeff and Greg, for putting this on. Thanks, Fuzz, for everything you do. Thanks to everybody who was part of this tonight. I appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to listening back to it on the podcast version as well. So thanks again. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Neil. And of course, Dave, not only do Greg and I expect you to get involved with everything that we're doing, we appreciate you coming on. And like I said, you've been kind to me as we've communicated in a matter, and it's really cool, the work that you're doing. I want you to share where people can find it, and then also to anything that you may have took away from this space. Like I said, man, you're involved with some really great work.
Well, I appreciate it, and I appreciate you guys having me. I learned a lot just listening in, and like I said, I think it's very cool that you guys have this for the opportunity for everyone to, share best practices and just, further the conversation, because, it's not set up fairly. There's a lot of great content out there that, needs people to come together, I think, to get it, to help get it out there. Because like I said, we've got a lot of advantages and still fail. So I appreciate it. I think, I walk away knowing that there's a good, a good spot to send people if they're, looking for advice from others. So it's great to have you all share it. And like I said, thanks for having me on. Podcastheat.com is our website. I'm Mr. Podcasting on socials, and feel free to reach out if I can help anyone. I will certainly do my best. I always enjoy doing it.
Love it. And Dave, you're welcome back any week that you're available and free and want to join us, man. You truly are.
Thank you, guys.
Take us home, Greg.
I have nothing to say. We usually start a space after this for the after show. You want to do that, Jeff, or no?
I cannot tonight, but you're more than welcome to, Greg.
No, this is your thing. This is the after show is all you, man. But
I'm the party guy.
You are, because I'm getting kind of sleepy because I'm old. Unlike you, I was around when Neil was on the radio. So, just to put that in perspective.
Wow.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for showing. And don't forget next week. And if you could share this with a couple of people, we'd like to grow this. We've had over 100 in here before.
We've had over 300 in here before.
We've had over 300 in here before. And I want to get that back to 301. Jeff, I think your internet radio statistics are a little off, but I'll take it.
Well, I meant join throughout the thing, but I think we're at a point now where
in here at one point.
we've had 300 people come in.
10,000.
10,000.
It just
10,000.
grows. It's just fucking growing as we go along here.
Put 3 zeros in front of that number.
That's exactly in front.
All right.
0.00 listeners.
Join us next week for Podcasting Power Hour. Be good, be safe, be yourself, and don't litter.
300 million.
Thank you for listening to the Podcasting Power Hour. Everyone is free to participate on Twitter Spaces every Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. To join, just follow Jeff at podcast_father or Greg at Indie Dropin. If you found this podcast helpful, go into your podcast app and write a quick review. Other podcasters will see it and know this show is worth listening to. Also, I'll put a few links in the show notes for ways you can support the show. I think by now you know we love our coffee. Have a great week.
1,000.
It just grows. It's
3
just
million.
fucking growing as we go along here.
Put 3 zeros in front of that number.
That's exactly in front.
All right.
0.00 listeners.
Join us next week for Podcasting Power Hour. Be good, be safe, be yourself, and don't litter.
300 million.
Thank you for listening to the Podcasting Power Hour. Everyone is free to participate on Twitter Spaces every Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. To join, just follow Jeff at podcast_father or Greg at Indie Dropin. If you found this podcast helpful, go into your podcast app and write a quick review. Other podcasters will see it and know this show is worth listening to. Also, I'll put a few links in the show notes for ways you can support the show. I think by now you know we love our coffee. Have a great week.